One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. Today these words are known by millions of people around the globe as they come from the world-famous fantasy novel, The Fellowship of the Ring, first in the Lord of the Rings trilogy written by J.R.R. Tolkien. Tolkien's real name is John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. He was born January 3, 1892 in Bloemfontein, South Africa. After his father died, his mother, him, and his brother moved to Sarehole, Birmingham, England. Later, after his mother died, he attended King Edward VI School and then got a language degree at Exeter College. During the First World War, Tolkien was part of the Lancashire Fusiliers. There he fought in the Battle of the Somme and soon married Edith Bratt in 1916. After the war, he eventually became a professor at Oxford. In 1937, he published The Hobbit, and over the span of 14 years, he wrote the Lord of the Rings trilogy, inspired by European myth and his own ideas, lore, and languages, which were published in 1954 and 55. Tolkien died September 2, 1973, at the age of 81. The Lord of the Rings books have been adapted into several movies, and the books have sold over 150 million copies, making it the second most sold book series ever. So what is the Fellowship of the Ring about? The Fellowship of the Ring takes place in the land of Middle-earth, where a dark lord named Sauron is attempting to recover the One Ring, which will help him to enslave the land. A creature named Gollum found it in a river, but a hobbit named Bilbo Baggins stole it from him. When Bilbo decides to leave after his 111th birthday, he leaves the ring to his much younger cousin Frodo, whom he often refers to as his nephew. Several years later, the wizard Gandalf the Grey comes to Frodo and warns him that he must leave his home at Bag End in the Shire, because Sauron is looking for the ring. So Frodo and his 3 hobbit friends set off, but they are chased by Sauron's evil minions, the 9 Black Riders. One of their first major challenges is passing through the Old Forest. There they encounter a tree that tries to swallow Merry and Pippin, but luckily they are saved by a man named Tom Bombadil. They soon arrive in the small town of Bree. There they meet a man named Aragorn, who helps them to get to Rivendell to meet up with Gandalf and Bilbo. On the way they encounter some Black Riders, but a flood washes the riders away and the group make it to their destination. In Rivendell, it is decided that the ring must be destroyed in the Cracks of Doom in Mordor. Frodo volunteers to bear the ring. He's accompanied by his hobbit friends, Aragorn, Gandalf, Legolas the Elf, Gimli the Dwarf, and a southern big folk named Boromir, who together make up the Fellowship of the Ring. First they try to get past the Misty Mountains by climbing over the Caret Ras, but bad weather forces them through another route under the mountains through the mines of Moria. There they are ambushed by an army of orcs, and Gandalf falls to his doom while fighting a demon Balrog. Regardless, the party continues and stops for a short rest in the elven land of Lorien. They then proceed to travel by boat down the Anduin River while being followed by Gollum. They stop near the edges of Mordor, where Frodo goes off alone to decide if they will enter Mordor now or not. He decides he doesn't want to endanger his friends and attempts to go off on his own, but Sam spots Frodo and instead the book ends with the pair heading off to Mordor together. So what makes it a fantasy genre novel? The Fellowship of the Ring can be considered a fantasy novel because it contains many fantasy themes, plot elements, and settings. First of all the themes found in the Fellowship of the Ring are often found in the fantasy genre. For example, good versus evil. Sauron wants to take the ring back so he can use it to achieve his evil goal of enslaving Middle-earth. However, the good Frodo and the Fellowship worked to keep the ring away from him and destroy it to prevent his evil ends. Friendship and loyalty. Frodo never has to travel alone. Even though his friends knew that the quest would be dangerous, they agreed to accompany him, and even though they faced many dangers, they never abandoned him. Sam even jumps into the river to prevent Frodo from having to go to Mordor alone. Resolving inner conflict. In the beginning of the novel, Frodo wants to rid himself of the ring, saying, "I am not made for perilous quests." But by the time he reaches Rivendell, he realizes that it is his duty and volunteers to bear the ring to Mordor. Secondly, as in many fantasy novels, the plot of the Fellowship of the Ring is based on the concept of a quest, surprising changes to plans, and is full of magic. The quest is when Gandalf informs Frodo that Sauron is after the ring and tells him that he must leave on a journey to get the ring away from the Shire. Once in Rivendell, they decide that the ring must be destroyed, and the quest becomes to deliver it to the Cracks of Doom. This quest sends the party through many dangers, which is usual in the fantasy genre. Surprising twists. The original plan, as you remember, was to climb over the Caradhras Mountain to get past the Misty Mountains, but because of the surprise blizzard, the group was forced to the alternate route in the Mines of Moria. There they were again surprised when they were ambushed by an army of orcs, and then of course again when the leader of the group, Gandalf, perished while falling into the abyss with the Balrog. Most importantly, there is an obvious presence of magic. The ring itself has the magical power to turn the user invisible, as well as to allow them to enslave others and force them to feel an obsessive possession over it. Gandalf also uses magic a few times to light fires and fight beasts. Finally, the land of Middle-earth where the novel takes place is a very natural but magical place, and as is common in fantasy stories based in the medieval ages. It is very primitive and natural. The architecture is old-fashioned. For example, hobbits live in houses dug out of hillsides. Also, the land is mostly undeveloped, and most time is spent traveling through forests, mountains, and on rivers rather than in towns. The land is also full of magical non-existent beings. Other than humans, or big folk, there are wizards, orcs, elves, dwarves, hobbits, and much more. And even with all this magic, the setting still seems realistic. Tolkien uses many proper nouns when describing the history of the land, and readers do not always know what these nouns are referring to, making it seem like they've just dropped into this standalone world. So in conclusion, The Fellowship of the Ring is an interesting and well-planned novel. Some of you may have seen the movie for this book, as well as for the rest of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but regardless, I think it would be beneficial to make an attempt to read it rather than just watch it. It's not the easiest to read because there are a lot of details to follow, but if you're up for a slightly more challenging book, this is definitely what I would recommend.